Good day, my Legends of Land podcast friends. Every land entrepreneur is different, and I love digging into the different tips, tactics, tricks, things they do to run their business effectively and tie that into their life. So, we have a special one for you here today. Kendall LeJeune is the founder of OnlyLandFans and the host of the OnlyLandFans podcast. It's a community of land flippers, developers, and wholesalers who come together and connect to learn and make an impact. Kendall is also the founder of CEO of Longhorn Land Partners. It's a real estate development company that specializes in land development. He's an entrepreneur at heart. Kendall's passionate about helping others carve out their own paths and pursue their dreams. Kendall's a sought after consultant in the areas of peak performance, leadership, and artistic direction, a former music educator. He's also active clinician, adjudicator, and designer for music programs and performance ensembles across the United States. Without further ado, Kendall LeJeune. Welcome to the show, Kendall. It's wonderful to meet you in person and just really excited to talk to you today. So tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into land.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Brandon. So my background is I was originally a high school band director. So I got started, I was teaching, and I always knew that I wanted to do something in real estate and started going to all the courses, taking all the classes, everything that I could find. And one of the easiest ways for me to wrap my mind around real estate and incorporate it into what I was already doing was house wholesaling. So I did house wholesaling for about 8 or 9 years in Houston. I had that business. And about year 4, I was able to retire full time from teaching and focused solely on that house wholesaling business. And during that time, I was very fortunate to have many different partners and mentors. And one of them said to me one day, they said, Kendall, why haven't you ever gotten into land? Have you ever thought about doing land and flipping land? And I was like, nah, I've got my systems and why fix what's not broken and that kind of thing. And he twisted my arm. He said, well, just give it a shot, see what it's like. And so I did. I put out some marketing for my very first land flip. And by the time I got that property under contract, since it was my first deal, I wasn't totally comfortable with actually comping out raw vacant land. And so I started pre-marketing this property, put it out to a few different people. And I had such a huge interest that I already had a buyer before I actually even locked the property up. So from the time I found the property and got it closed and funded, it was a total of 12 days. Hadn't even had a chance to go out to the property yet, which was totally different from wholesaling houses, and I was hooked. I think within the next couple of days, I transitioned my business completely over to flipping land.
That's so good. So how did your friend get you into it in the first place? They pulled you in. They were like, here's the places to call. Here's what to do. I mean, how much foreplanning did you do, or did you just kind of jump in with the systems you had?
I really just jumped in with the systems that I had. The people I surround myself with are very like-minded people. We're very like entrepreneurial. And so always talking about just different ways to play this entrepreneurial game. And my friend said, hey, you're doing the same thing with houses. Why don't you just try it with land? And I'm of the mindset of like, when you find something and it works, like just keep going deeper and really specializing in that. And so I was a little bit hesitant at first, but I gave it a shot. And the fact that it was so much easier, and when I say easier, I do want to clarify. So I'm not going to say that it's easy. I will say it was much more simple, right, than flipping or wholesaling houses. I didn't have to go and do repair estimates. I didn't have to coordinate anything with the tenants. I didn't have to go out and show the property. If you want to see it, just drive by. It was a much more simple process. And so when I realized like how much it could streamline what I was already doing in my household selling business, I like I said, I was hooked. This is amazing. I'm a land person now. Yeah, that's how I kind of got into it.
I like that story. It's similar to, I tell people, I was a real estate agent and then I flipped houses for a while. At one point, I've jacked the house up in the air to repair the foundation. And so when you think about, you talked about it being more simple. You don't have to do anything crazy like that. It's maybe you build a little road, put in a fence. Like a lot of times it's not easy, but it is simple compared to some of the things you'll get yourself into. I didn't mean to do that either. I had purchased the house and then figured out like, oops, I shouldn't have done this.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that, if you are kind of like entrepreneurial minded and you're always looking for what's like a more efficient way, streamlined way of doing things, I think it's really easy to, once you're in the real estate space and you do a deal and you're like, okay, what would have made that easier? What would
Mhm.
have made that even easier? And by the time you kind of whittle it all away, it's, but I just flip the land and let someone else worry about the structures or something like that. I think that it becomes a lot more clear. So I've met a lot of self-proclaimed, what's the best word? Just rehabbed house flippers or house wholesalers, recovering house wholesalers. That's the word I was looking for, that are now wholesaling land or flipping land or developing land. So
It's so true. It's like the natural spot to land. If you do it long enough, you land on land. It's like the first principle thinking of what am I really doing here? Oh yeah, there's just this piece of dirt. That's the fun part. Like swinging the deals and making the stuff happen is the fun part. Dealing with the building's not. So I love.
yeah, and I think it's funny because I think a lot of people don't start directly in land because like land is not super sexy, right? It's just a
Mhm.
piece of dirt. It's just a blank canvas. And so I think with like mainstream HGTV shows and things like that, I think when people think of, oh, I'm going to do this real estate thing, like they think about a house or a structure that they want to get in and improve or make better some kind of way. And, when you just look at a piece of land, you're like, yeah, but that doesn't make for good TV. So that's not really interesting. And so I think that a lot of people have that similar trajectory where they get started doing the house thing and realize, hey, there may be maybe a simpler way to go about doing this.
Yeah. Talk about a little bit about your journey. So you did that first land flip, and then you said you ported your systems over, or you kind of just transitioned everything. What did that look like? Did you have other team members, or were you what did you do exactly?
Yeah, that's a really good question. At the time, the operation, we had several virtual assistants. I was working with a business partner, and we also had several in person employees that were working for the company. And so when I decided to transition over to land, we first just started with just transitioning everyone over to a different type of asset, still using some of the same systems and processes. But we realized really quickly, very early on, that we could run this a lot leaner because there was less boots on the ground that we needed. Just the process itself was simpler. And so we're able to do that with more of a skeleton crew. We either transitioned our team member over to the land space and doing some of the systems and processes that we had put in place or transitioned over to land. And if we didn't need that position anymore, then we transitioned them to a different part of the company. My business partner has several different businesses, and so we just kind of moved those team members over to a different role in a different business. And so long story long, we really just kind of scaled everything down because we didn't need that many people. And so the first couple of years of the land business, we were really only operating with myself, and I think we had 2 virtual assistants at the time. Yeah, it was a pruning, if you will, a pruning process.
That's cool. And something that's unique about you, I feel like, is the community that you've built, and probably some of that transfers over into your company culture and how you treat and interact with people on your team. What, how do you think about company culture and the people that you work with daily, and how does that operate for you?
Yeah, I always get excited about this question because it's one of the things that I really geek out about. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. In my former life as a teacher, one of the big things I loved to do was run our student leadership programs. And so every program that I worked with had a very robust student leadership program, and we developed out that curriculum. And very early on, when I got into business, I realized like you're only as good as your team, right? And so I mean, that was a core principle of mine from the very beginning, is to just make sure that I am pouring into my team as much as possible. I want everyone on my team to be better at everything than I am. And so building out that company culture was really about nourishing what my team members needed individually, making sure that they were in the right seats, right people, right seats. That's definitely a big Gino Wickman thing. And just making sure that they had the right tools to, number one, do the job, and that they felt comfortable in the environment that we created to start taking ownership and having autonomy over the different processes. I think that one of the most successful, or one of the most the biggest indicators of success in my opinion when it comes to team building and culture in a company is when the team itself starts to take a life of its own and start pushing that company and growing it in ways that's very organic, in ways that far outpace the vision that the founder of the company had. And I always love seeing that. It's a very super cool thing to see. So community culture, that's always been something that I've really focused on, because I really do think that is one of the major ingredients to the secret sauce that make businesses run really well, organizations in general.
Can you talk a little bit about tactically how you make that happen? Are you doing like monthly meetings where you're looking at their, their long-term goals with the company? What's it like to work at your company in that?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Brandon. The very first thing, it starts off with anytime we bring someone on into the team, we make sure that they are in alignment with our company value. Customer success and excellence and kindness are some of our core company values. And so anytime we bring someone on, right at the interview phase, we start asking questions around those values to see if they are going to jive with that, right? Once we figure out that, yeah, okay, I think that they would be a good fit, the next thing that we do is we assess personality assessments, making sure that these people who we are looking at have the right sort of makeup for the position that we're filling. Because oftentimes we've seen that, I mean, we have remarkable people that want to be part of the team. And because we do keep our team very small, it's really important that they A, fit our company values, and B, that they are the right people for that specific position. And so we don't hire specifically just on that personality assessment, but learning how people work and what climates they thrive in and what their strengths and what their weaknesses are really allow us to manage that team landscape significantly better. And so we look at what other types of personalities do they get along well with. Okay, what personalities will they be working with in this particular position, right? And so we take a look at that. So our hiring process, we are very slow to hire and very quick to fire. So we want to make sure that we're doing all the due diligence that we need to in order to bring in the right fit, the right people. And once we do that, we want to make sure that we're giving them the right tools to be able to succeed. I don't know if I answered your question, but what was the second part of that question?
You know what? I'm not sure, but I have another one.
Hey, perfect.
I love that answer, by the way. It's like very thorough. That's what I was looking for. So there's two ways people I've heard look at hiring. And one is you get this just very specific, detailed structure. Here's exactly what you do in your job. Here's like the perfect SOPs. Like I can just grab some off the street, plug them into this, and they're going to go through this process and they'll be able to do it. But if you hire talented enough people, maybe they don't even need to look at the SOP. I think that's a little bit of a spectrum. Where would you fall on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that for us, we do take painstaking efforts to make sure that our SOPs are really dialed in, that because we're very customer oriented first. Like that's a really important pillar for our company. So we want to make sure that all customer buckets, whether it's the seller, whether it's a buyer, whether it's a vendor, third party that we're working with, that they all have remarkable experiences with us. And so we're very detailed about the customer journey and what they're going to experience. So I don't allow very much deviation from my SOPs. Now, in terms of just hiring someone off the street and plugging them in, I do think that the training is the easier part. That's always the easier part. I think that what's the biggest part for us is just making sure that who we do hire has a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. We want to make sure that these people are abundance minded, that they like challenges, that if we handed them that SOP book and said, okay, this is the playbook, do this, and the next week we said, hey, we're tearing all that up, this is the new one, that they'd say, okay, how can we make this better, right? So that's kind of the approach that we take is, yes, we really dial in our processes and systems, but we also want to make sure that the person that we're bringing in is going to be a right fit on the team.
And do you do the interviewing yourself? Are you like very hands-on with that? Does it come through a funnel, or how do you think about that part?
Yeah, so I'm extremely hands-on. So our hiring process, we do have a funnel that whenever we put out an all call for when we open up a position, let's say it's a virtual assistant position, we'll get hundreds of applicants. And just by virtue of that very first step, for us it starts with the job description. So in the job description, it will literally say something like include your favorite color in the email subject line. And when we get emails that don't have those colors, subject line, we know, okay, this person is not a detail oriented person. So pretty much like 75% of people actually weed themselves out of the very first step of the funnel. Right.
Yeah.
And so once those people come in, then I am very hands-on I do want to interview them. And I actually don't interview on any real technical skills. I just want to know who they are as people. And again, we're asking questions around our company values. Once that interview step is complete, then I will actually pass it off to their supervisor, their person that's going to be working right along with them. And so we'll have another team member that will interview them more about technical things. They'll give them an example assignment to do so we can see how they work, really problem solve, and then the final decision is mine, and we do a third round of interviews, and I like to interview every single person. So I am very hands-on because I'm very protective over the company culture and the team that we're putting together.
And then the public facing part of all that is your brand. And so that definitely comes across in your brand. That's part of the reason I wanted to interview you, because I see you in these different places running these awesome communities. So I got to talk to Kendall because he's doing some really cool stuff. So talk about your brand and how you show what you're doing to the world.
Yeah. So when I first got started in land, there wasn't really a whole lot of people talking about it. And constantly I was thinking like, oh gosh, it'd be amazing if I could just post this question and get this answered and that type of thing. And so once I got my land business rolling and we're 2 or 3 years in, I was like, I think that I want to create some type of community around what we do. Not to take away anything from the other communities that are out there, but we can't have too much education. We can't have too much community, especially in our small niche. And I actually started a Facebook group called OnlyLandFans. And it's really just an online education community where people can come in and ask questions. And I wanted it to be a really healthy mix of seasoned investors all the way to brand new investors. That way people could get a really good cross section of what's happening in the space and ask questions of all different levels and experience levels. And so once I started doing that, I was like, how can I continue to add value to the community? How can I just give so much value? What kind of things do I want to see in this land community? And one of the things that I've always been fascinated about is how different operators start their businesses, grow them, scale them, and then again, what types of communities and cultures are they creating? And so I said, I'm just going to interview people that are like crushing it in the land game and put that in the community. And so now we have this format where I will do a live interview inside the Facebook group and people can hop on the call live. They can ask questions and we actually reformat that into the podcast, which is the OnlyLandFans podcast. And so right now we have just finished I think it's 68th or 69th interview, and it's where we feature 7-figure land flippers that are sharing with us exactly how they've built and grow their businesses and all the tactical details, nuts and bolts of how you can do that yourself. So
do you see commonalities? If you've interviewed almost 70 people at this point, and you probably have seen some interesting patterns, does anything jump out to you in great land investors?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So one of the things that I've seen from just about every single land investor that I've interviewed on the show is a generosity and almost like this feeling of responsibility to share what's working for them in their business. And that's not something that I originally thought that I would see. I didn't expect to see that. I expected, if you'd have asked me, what do you expect to see when you first started your podcast? I would have thought, I expect to see like really driven people or people that are incredibly ambitious to be running multi 7-figure businesses. And honestly, it couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, we do have those super ambitious people. We also have people that are just like, hey, look, I'm good to do a couple of $1 million entitlements a year and I'm good. It's me and a yellow pad. So there's a lot of different business models represented, but one of the commonalities that I've seen is just the generosity of sharing information and helping however they can and being just generous with their information and with their knowledge. And so that's been something that's really cool to see. And then also, I've also seen a pattern of there's definitely an independence streak that happens, I think, with most people that I interview in terms of, hey, this is hard and I'm going to figure it out. No one's going to help me figure it out. I'm going to figure it out myself. Right. Or no one's going to hand me the results that I want. I'm just going to go out and do it. And so there's just this, call it independence, call it grit, call it just natural curiosity, just, hey, this sounds cool. How do I do it? But it's just this willingness to commit and do the thing. So that's what I've seen the most with the people that I have the pleasure to interview.
Do you think that's reflective of the type of person you are or reflective of the business? Because you're obviously very generous, abundance mindset. You've got your independent streak clearly. Are you attracting those people or do you think that's inherent in the business?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't know everyone in the business, so it's kind of hard for me to to say, but I do think it's probably a combination of both. I think that from an energetic level, I think that we do attract the people that wind up in our circles on some level. I can say that I have met the most incredible people in the land space. That is not something that I expected either. Coming from a single family house background, I was used to a climate that was very combative and competitive. And this is my information. What's that thing from Lord of the Rings, like my precious kind of, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's the feeling that I had with meeting a lot of the single family home investors that I had worked with in the past. Not saying that all of them are. I don't want to paint everyone with the same brush. I met some really generous people, but I expected there to be a level of that coming into a newer space like the land space. And it could not be further from the truth. I mean, like I said, I had the pleasure of meeting so many people in the land space. And every time I walk away from a podcast, a conversation, an event, I am always just amazed by how incredibly generous everyone is and just how just chill and laid back and cool everyone is about what they do. I've met some really amazing people. And yeah, I just think that it's probably a mixture of both. I think it's who we attract, and also that's just a profile of a lot of people in the land space.
Yeah. When you said that real estate wasn't the same, I instantly flashed back to being in real estate. Yeah, actually, it was not at all. So it's there's definitely there's something inherent with land where it may be that it's a bit of a blue ocean. It feels like there's 100 million pieces of land out there. You could go anywhere and find it. Doesn't seem like there's this direct competition. I have an abundance mentality anyway, in general, even in real estate. It wasn't like cared what other people were doing, but I just think there's so much to go around in land. And it's almost like everyone's out there paving these new ways of doing it as well. I've only interviewed, I think you're my 15th interview, so not as experienced as you, but with all the people I've talked to in land, they're all doing it a little differently also. There's no one, I'm doing it this exact same way as this other person's. They're all kind of got their angles, and I love that part of it.
Yeah, that's a fantastic way of putting it, Brandon. I think that it comes back to that sort of like independent streak that I was talking about earlier, is that I've interviewed dozens and dozens of people, and they all have, like you said, their own angle, their own way of doing the business. And I think it's because there's just not a ton of information out there, but B, like an abundance mindset. So they're like, okay, this works this way for this person. It may not work exactly for me that way because land is different, very different depending on which markets you're in. And so I'm going to be okay with just doing a little twist on it. And now this is my thing. Right. And
Mhm.
so that is a really interesting insight. I think that you're totally right about that.
What's your angle on land? What do you, in your personal business, how do you approach it?
Yeah, so when I first got started, it was doing infill lots. And I think that was probably the easiest natural progression for me to get started because I was already doing single family houses, wholesaling, take the house off, and then you're just left with the lot, but you're still within the neighborhood. You're still within the same due diligence processes and procedures that we would do for a house, just scrape the entire structure off of it. So when I first got started, I was doing the single family infill lots, and I love infill lots for so many reasons. But for people that are listening to this and they're like, okay, how do I get started? What's the fastest way for me to be able to do this? In my opinion, an infill lot can be one of the fastest types of properties when we're talking about cash conversion cycle to get funded, right? Like closed and funded. And so in comparison to like a subdivide, where a subdivide may take 12 months to 3 years, it just depends on the type of subdivide you're doing. With an infill lot, I mean, you can, like I said, I've closed an infill lot in 12 days. Sometimes it'll take a month, 2 months. I haven't really seen things go much longer than 3 months when you're talking about infill lots. And so the first probably 3 years of my business, we did infill lots. Now I'll tell you this, Brandon, a lot of people in the land space, you'll hear this often said, it takes just as much effort to do a small deal as it takes to do a big deal. I think that's true in some aspects. I don't think it's the same amount of effort to flip an infill lot as it does to do a subdivide or an entitlement. So I
Yeah.
think that you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt. But I know a lot of people that won't touch infill lots because they're like, oh no, I want to do like bigger deals. And I'm like, okay, what are you talking about bigger deals? Like larger acreage? Is that what excites you? And usually it's always about, no, the money. I want a bigger return. And it always makes me laugh because there's just this thought out there that you can't make a lot of money on infill lots. Now, I'll throw this little mini case study out. So I have a student in my coaching program, very first deal ever. Now, I always, like I said, I like to start people with infill lots if they haven't done a lot of land deals. And so her very first deal, she was from the insurance sector. She's working full time. We got her rolling with a marketing campaign. Her very first deal that she got is down in Florida. She got it locked up for $75,000. This is an infill lot within a gated community, I think. 75K is the buy price, and she will be able to bring it to market at 195. So it's
Yeah.
yeah, right. It's $125,000 net profit on an infill lot. So I'm like, don't sleep on infill lots. So long story, long answer. I started doing infill lots and then we started adding in rural recreational property as well as subdivides. And so now I'm doing far less infill lots and we're just doing our longer term cash conversion cycle subdivides now.
Awesome. And don't sleep on Florida also. The property down there is hot with those
Oh my
flipping
gosh,
infill lots
yeah,
like that. It's wild, huh?
huge. And it's so funny. So you just mentioned hot market. I know so many people, or I hear this all the time. Oh, I can't go there. It's saturated. There's
Mhm.
too much competition. And I think that if you are in a market that has a lot of other people in it, it's probably because it's a good market. That doesn't really scare me. I think that when it comes to being in hot markets, trying to survive in hot markets, one of the best things that you can do is just make sure that your client experience is like the number one thing that is going to differentiate you from everyone else, right? Because we see in these super saturated markets, like down in Florida, like we'll talk to an owner and they're like, oh, yeah, this is the 15th call I've got today on my property. And it's fantastic. Why haven't you sold it yet? And we start really getting down to the nitty gritty of the fact that, like, a lot of competition can't close on the property. They don't really know what they're doing. They just send a letter, they won't follow up. And I think that if you put the customer first and you build in processes and systems that allow them to know and trust you while you're educating and nurturing that lead, you'll get the lead or you'll get that deal 9 times out of 10. It doesn't matter how much competition is out there, because we often get contracts on properties where we're not the highest bidder. So it's not always price and a competitive market.
Can you talk a little bit more about that customer relationship and maybe the unique touch points, or is it just how you talk to them on the phone, or is it delivering on promises and setting small promises that you clearly deliver on? What's that look like to have a good customer experience?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The answer is yes to all of those things, right? So I think that it's really easy in the real estate space for investors to think about the deal. Like if someone says, "Tell me about this deal," 9 times out of 10, they are not going to talk about the owner or the buyer unless it has to do with like motivation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they were really motivated. They needed to sell the property. We got it at this. Like that approach, I think, does a lot of people disservice, because at the end of the day, this is a people business, right? Like we are dealing with people that own properties and that want to sell or need to sell or have some type of problem that they need to solve. And so I love the term customer experience because it literally is an experience. And the way that I like to break it down to people is, think about when you go to Disney World, okay? That is an experience. From the time you go to the website to start pricing your trip and start booking things, it's a whole experience, right? You book something online with Disney, and then you get like your armband in a couple of weeks before your trip. And there's this whole like build up to the trip. And then when you get there, I mean, like the shuttles are branded, it's an experience, right? And so I think that I like to approach my business that way, in terms of, from the first time we interact with that customer, what are they experiencing? Because they're going to be making some kind of snap judgment. And what do you want that snap judgment to be? And so the way that we speak with them, the words that we use, the tone that we use, the framework, the positioning, I think it's so important to be as transparent as possible. So every single thing that we do with a lead, with a potential client, is supporting and fostering that brand, that feeling that we want the customer to have with us. We want them to know and trust us. And of course, like you mentioned, it takes lots of little mini milestones of telling them, setting up expectations, fulfilling those expectations, giving them some education. Oftentimes we talk to sellers who want market value for their property. I can't tell you how many times I get this question: "Kendall, everyone that I talk to wants market value for their property." And I'm like, yes. But I mean, who's going to say, "Hey, listen, I've got this beautiful piece of property. I want to sell it for pennies on the dollar"? Very few people will, right? And when it comes to vacant land, it's a different type of owner than an owner who has a distressed house, right? Like with a distressed homeowner, they're looking to save their credit. They're looking to be able to move into something else because they're about to be homeless. Oftentimes, this is their only asset that they have. None of that is true typically for a vacant landowner. Typically, a vacant landowner has a piece of property that they're not living on, hence the term vacant, right? It's something that's already paid for, because very few people have mortgages on, especially something like an infill lot, right? And so this is something extra that they have. And so people are not going to typically find motivation or pain in the same way that you would find that with a homeowner. So that's something, like in my company, we don't even use the term, "Is this a motivated seller?" We
Mhm.
use the term, "Is it qualified? Are they a qualified seller? Have they expressed any interest at all in selling their property?" And from that point, then we start to really kind of figure out what is the problem that they're having, or they may not even know that they have a problem. That's one of the big kickers, Brandon, is that they don't know that they have a problem. And so figuring out the fact of, hey, what are your plans with the property? You bought the property, you wanted to build on it and retire on it. That plan has changed. Life often does that. What are you going to do with the property? I don't know. I think I might give it to my kids when I die. Okay, are they prepared to pay the inheritance tax? And how does is your probate situation all set up? And then oftentimes they haven't even thought about that. They haven't thought about probably their heirs are going to have to liquidate the property if they want to keep it, or if they want to, or if they want to get some kind of money out of it. And so typically it's okay. Do you think your son's going to want to move to this other state to build on it? And whenever they realize, oh no, they're probably going to sell it anyway, we say, okay, let's talk about some of those liquidation opportunities for you. So we help them to figure out like what their problem is, because lots of times they don't even realize that they have a problem. And then they are interested in selling and they don't want to just keep it in the family, then we help them to do that. So instead of, there's that term negotiating, right? Like we negotiate on the price, or we're going back and forth. A good friend of mine, Ray Zhang, who I've had on the show, he's a master negotiator. He did 160 land deals in four months or something like that. And he says that when you are going back and forth on the price, that's not negotiating, that's bargaining. And so we actually don't bargain on price. We look at what they want to achieve. We look at some possible solutions and we present it that way. So kind of a long answer for you, but it really starts with how they experience us from the very beginning, and then how we position ourselves as problem solvers, and then how do we fulfill on those promises.
I love that answer. There was a lot of gems in there. That's going to be one I clip out and post by itself, because that's quality. I like that. Qualified versus motivated was a great angle. And it sounds like the brand within your company, the kindness, transparency, generosity, the abundance mindset, it sounds like you're taking that into the world of your clients as well. You're talking to them like a human and just, let's figure out what's actually best for you here.
Absolutely. And that is 1000% always the goal. Is if we can work something out where it's a win for everyone, then fantastic. But what does win look like? For us and for my company, win looks like we helped you to solve the problem. That's your win. And our win is that we've helped you to do that, even if we don't make a dollar. So there's lots of times where we are talking to a seller and we realize, okay, this person literally cannot go any lower than market value. So what will we do? We'll say, hey, Mr. Seller, listen, based on what you've told us, we think probably the best option for you is to just list it on the market. That's the way that you're going to get the highest amount. So we can't be end buyers, but we can at least help facilitate. We can connect you with an agent in that area to help you to do that. And so whether it's we're closing on the deal, we're signing the deal, we're at least making a referral, we're helping that client first. And that, I think, when you do good and you put good out, it always comes back. And so that's always the goal for us, is to position ourselves that we are helping the client first.
How do the clients get to you? So are you sending out mailers, or what's the top of your funnel look like? And then when it gets, is it you on the phone when it gets to that stage, or what's that part? How's it look?
Yeah, that's a really good question. When we were very heavy in infill lots, we were doing a combination. We were kind of doing like an omni-channel marketing method, if you will. So we work with Supercharged Offers, Alicia Jarrett, fantastic people. Definitely want to give a shout out to that company. But they have a very robust funnel that we were able to customize and work with, where we send out cold calls, we have text messages, we have ads, we have some digital marketing, retargeting things that they go to our social media accounts, and then we can target them with a pixel and retarget them and get them some resources, ebooks, things like that. And then mail is at the end of our funnel. And so we'll always, like, whenever we are think about the shape of a funnel, where we go from really large volumes to very small volumes, that's also how I like to approach our marketing. So we'll do the cheapest, most cost-efficient type of marketing at the very top of the funnel, and we'll save the very end of the funnel for the more expensive marketing channels like mail. So the answer to that question is we do a mixture of all of these types of different marketing methods, specifically for those infill lots. Now, to get them on the phone, we typically, if it's an infill lot, I'll have a team member actually talk to the seller, work with the seller, take them through our seller nurture sequence. And then if it's like a subdivide, an off-market subdivide deal, then I will talk to the seller because it's a different type of owner, different type of seller psychology. They typically have a little bit more complex issues that we need to work through. So I'll get on the phone with that. We also work on market deals. And I actually don't work on market deals directly. I have a team member that will do that because every single person that's on the market, they've raised their hand and said, I'm interested. So that qualifies them right off the bat. So I don't talk to every single potential seller. It's only those very specific, more complex cases.
And how many of those do you think you deal with a month? Like, how often are you the person on the phone you're making deals?
Oh, that's a good question. Probably for the subdivides, I'll say probably about 7 or 8 times a month. Our subdivide opportunities go through a pretty rigorous test before they get to me. Usually when I get on the phone, I'll know exactly what the issue is. And it really comes down to planting seeds. Like our subdivides, like we've done a deal where it took 18 months of nurturing just to get that person to sign a contract. And so we're very aware of that. We're okay with that. And so oftentimes when I get on the phone, it's really because I want to plant a seed personally so they know from the owner of the company that this is who we are and this is what we can do for them.
What's your favorite type of deal? If you could just do one type of deal, what interests you?
That's a good question. My favorite type of deal is I can't really say if it's like an infill lot or a subdivide. My favorite type of seller is someone who we can really make an impact for. So for example, we worked with a gentleman who had a 30-acre parcel and he was older in his, I think, early 80s, and he needed to liquidate that property in order for him to be able to move to an assisted living facility. And so we've been working with him and working with his, I think it was a niece that was helping him with that, and getting him what he needed to go to that next stage was such a fulfilling and rewarding experience. And it wasn't just like hey, we got you 20 grand so you can go to Paris for a couple of weeks. It was literally, we are helping you into your next stage of life. And so that was an extremely rewarding deal. And so to answer your question, my favorite types of deals is when they are connected with really fantastic human stories that we're able to solve and make a real impact for.
Maybe that's an angle for your podcast. You start telling human stories about these awesome people you help out in land deals, and then
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's a good idea.
People come and just sell their land to you so you can tell their story. That's killer. I like that.
Yeah.
Does owner financing play a role in how you approach some of these human interactions?
Yeah. So whenever we present possible solutions to sellers, we always present 3 or 4 different solutions. That's one of the beautiful things about land that I'm sure is that you can be as creative as you want to be. You can put creative financing together. You can partner with the sellers. You can do assignments, cash. You can just be as creative as you would like to be with these types of deals. And so what we'll do is we'll take a look, we'll really listen to the seller, and then we'll craft 3 or 4 deals or 3 or 4 offers for them to see what fits best for them. Because some people, they really are in a time crunch, or some people are really more motivated by the price and not so much the money, or excuse me, not so much the time. And whenever you really listen and then craft the offers, it introduced a whole host of different opportunities. And so we've done a few owner finance things where we've bought an owner finance and then turned around and sold an owner finance. I am definitely a visionary. And so I don't love getting into like the numbers just don't light me up. They just don't excite me. Like I mentioned, you asked me what was my favorite deal. Some people would say, oh, it's a deal that I made $300,000 on, right?
Mm-hmm.
That'd be kind of hard not to say that's a fun deal. But I went to the human side of it. So yes, the numbers are important just from a standpoint of the financial well-being of the company. And so I do really pay attention to that kind of thing. But in terms of structuring deals, that's not super sexy to me. I really like being able to have that human element. So I can say, oh yes, this owner finance deal really worked for this person because of XYZ. And that's what lights me up very much. But just in terms of owner finance, I don't, that type of deal structure, I mean, I don't fall in love with deal structures, but we do use them in the business. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it's a tool. It's not your, it's not
Yeah.
your brand. It's not what drives you. I totally get it. I know when I asked a question about a land deal and you say your favorite is this one person, it's okay. Yeah, you're definitely staying on message here. You're very, that's cool. I love that about your brand. Tell me about the OnlyLandFans, like the name. How'd you come up with that? I mean, it's clever. It's catchy. Someone hears it once, they're like, okay, is that just like at once, or was that like, how'd that come about?
Yeah, it actually just came to me. I was thinking about what could I name the community that explains in the name who it's for, right? And so originally I was like, okay, land, we know it has to do something with land. I want land in the name. And so when I was kind of trying to workshop some ideas, I was thinking, okay, who is this community for? And the very first thing that came to me is this community is for fans of all things land. And I was like, okay, so what would a member of this community call themselves? They call themselves a land fan, right? And I'm like, okay, I just had this, I don't know, it's just this, I only want land fans in this community. And then I said, okay, only land fans, only land fans. And that's kind of how it came about. And so it was something that was like catchy enough. I ran it by a few people. I was like, hey, yeah, what would you think about this? And they're like, well, definitely get my attention. I was like, okay. So that's how I came across the name.
That's clever. I like it. Let's talk a little bit about your community. You run meetups, in-person meetups. We've talked about your Facebook, and you do really interesting live streams. What are the in-person meetups like, and how often are those?
Yeah, so we actually have an in-person meetup coming up in a few days, actually. So our in-person meetups is really just an opportunity for us to be able to connect with people in, a specific area. Again, a lot of what I do with the brand has to do with, I'd love to sit here and tell you like, oh, it's this super like high level strategy that I'm doing, but it really has grown in a super organic way and just trying to fill a need. And so I live in the Austin market. And when I started looking around for in-person meetups, like I couldn't find hardly any for land specific. And I was like, okay, I have a podcast. We have an audience. We have a community. So I just threw it up in the community. Hey, how many Austin people are here? And by doing that, like I came across quite a few people that live in Austin. Also, Anshul Sharma, who is a guest of mine, also lives in the Austin area. We have quite a few people in the area that I didn't even know about. And so we're just going to do like Only Land Fans Austin edition. And so that's how that's how the in-person meetup came about. And so it's really just an opportunity for people to come together, to connect, to share deals. And it's really cool because we get an even larger cross section. What I've found is most people that are doing land, not as like a seven-figure land business operator, but are people that are doing land deals just in general, also have like other types of real estate that they're doing, right? So it's sometimes I've come across people that they got into land because they bought a house that was on two lots and it was an investment property and they wanted to split the lot. And then through the virtue of that whole experience, they were like, oh, the lot thing is so much easier. Let's do that. And so I came across a lot of people like here in Austin that they'll come to the event because they've done a land deal, but they're not just land. Like they are like, oh yeah, we do residential assisted living. We have a lot of people that flip businesses that also do land deal. I mean, it's the coolest mix of entrepreneurs. And so that's how that in-person meetup came to be. So we come together, we do deals together, we share deals and collaborate. And that's my favorite part of it, is just being able to meet new people to like team up with and do stuff with. It's pretty amazing.
Is it consistently once a month or once a quarter? And what's the most interesting thing that's come of it?
Yeah, it is once a month. We do them once a month here in Austin. And one of the coolest things I think was probably the fact that, so we were when we first started doing our meetups are we've only been doing this for about 3 or 4 months now, but the very first 1 or 2, we would meet at a restaurant, a local restaurant, just get together, break bread, talk land, and meet each other. And we were sitting there, and there was this guy that was like sitting like in the booth behind us that was like kept leaning in and was like, and it was noticeable to me, and I was like, maybe it's just me. And then like other people started noticing like, hey, this guy he keeps leaning in. And so eventually, like, someone asked him, are you interested in land? And he was like, as a matter of fact, I listened to the podcast and I would love to
No
do a
way.
land deal. And I've been doing this. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. So we had him come over to the table. And I think like we connected him with a lender that was there, and he's like now doing a deal or something like that. So that's really cool, just in terms of being able to meet people that you would not have otherwise met.
What's next for your community? Is anything you're looking at expanding? Because you have the Meetup Facebook page. I think you have a school group as well. Like, where are in podcasts? So you've got all kinds of stuff. Is there anything that's coming next, or what are you working on now?
Yeah, we've got some big things coming, Brandon. Super excited to launch it pretty soon. Yeah, I'm just always looking for, at heart, I'm a creative, like I'm a musician. That's what I do. That's my thing. And so I'm always looking to grow and fill a need and have opportunities and platforms to create and express. And one of the things that I do, you mentioned school, that's a paid community where like I had a lot of people that were reaching out. Was like, Kendall, how can we get contracts and templates, and can you walk through videos and do all this other stuff? And I actually have a small group coaching program that I coach people on how to build processes and systems in their business to get consistent land deals. So typically it's people that come from a different, like maybe they're multifamily and they want to add land into the mix, or maybe they've done land here and there. Like a good friend of mine, Logan Fulmer, calls them a deal shop. They'll do a few deals, whatever they need to do the deal, but they don't have consistent processes and systems that lead to consistent closed deals. So I will help them to build out their processes and systems around that. But there was this need in the middle that maybe someone wasn't ready to commit to having a coach and like accountability partners and be in this community where you get on once a week and you're like, okay, how many offers did you make? That kind of thing. So I created a community where people could come together and pay a very small fee that actually just covers my team to be able to manage and keep that platform on school going. And it's just a place for people to come and get whatever resources. It's like a content bank. And we also have special master classes where I'll invite people on from the podcast to give specific master classes, how to use AI in your land business, or how to do 6-figure wholesale deals. It's very different from just a traditional deal, right? So we'll have those people come on, and school members can ask any questions that they want. So it's like a mastermind with that individual person. And then I'm also available to do mastermind calls once a month in that community. But just in terms of the next step, I am also starting to work with people who have reached out to me and been like, Kendall, like, how can I create a brand for my business, or how can I create a personal brand that will help attract more deals, that will help me to have a voice in the community and that type of thing. And so I've been working on that as well, and working with a few individuals. And so that's been super fun putting that together. But yeah, we've got some pretty big things in OnlyLandFans land for people. It's very exciting.
That's wonderful. And it sounds like people could probably reach out to you directly if they want some coaching, and also if they're looking for some personal branding. Those are things you're open to people pinging you about?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So if you want to connect with me, you can just email me at kendall@onlylandfans.com, or you can go to our onlylandfans.com website. And every piece, like the podcast, the school, coaching, all of that stuff is on onlylandfans.com. If you're interested in the virtual meetup, that's there as well. So it's just a great hub for all things OnlyLandFans.
Wonderful. What an awesome podcast. So cool to meet you, Kendall. And we have one last question that I always ask people. If you could put one message onto Twitter and everyone on Twitter would see it, not just land people, everyone would see it, what message would you put out there?
That's really good. I would say that one thing that you've always wanted to do, but were too afraid to do it, go do it today. That would be the thing.
Yes. What a great note to end on. Thank you so much, Kendall. It was a pleasure talking to you today. And yeah, I can't wait to run across you in one of your communities here.
Yeah, Brandon, thanks so much for having me on. This has been so much fun to be on this side of the mic,
Yeah.
and always a pleasure to connect. And I'm so glad we finally got to meet each other.
Wonderful. Have a good day.
Thanks so much, you too.